The vacuum had been shut off for exactly 4 minutes when Talia Brooks pressed her back against the hallway wall outside the east living room and let the tears come, quiet, controlled, the kind of crying a person learns to do when crying loudly has never once been allowed. She held her phone tight against her ear, voice dropped to a whisper even though the mansion's east wing was supposed to be empty at this hour. 22 years old, 6 months into this job, and she was standing in a hallway lined with silk wallpaper doing math in her head that never came out right. "Mama, I sent what I could," she whispered. "I know it isn't enough. I know. I'm picking up every extra shift they'll give me. I swear I am." Her mother's voice crackled thin through the speaker, worry folded into every word the way it always was these days, and Talia closed her eyes and pressed her free hand flat against the wall like she could steady the whole conversation just by holding something solid. The rent on their apartment back home had gone up again, the third increase in a year, and no matter how many extra shifts she picked up cleaning a mansion that could have swallowed their entire building twice over, the math still did not work. "I'll figure it out," Talia said. "I always figure it out. I have to go, Mama. I love you. Please don't worry." She hung up and pressed the phone to her chest, and let herself have exactly 10 more seconds of falling apart before she would wipe her face, straighten her apron, and go back to being the maid who kept the East Wing spotless and said nothing about anything, ever, because that was the job, that was the only version of herself this house had room for. What she did not know, standing there with her back against silk wallpaper, was that the door to the east living room was not fully closed, and had not been for the last several minutes, and that Ryusuke Yamashita, the man who owned this mansion and the empire that funded it, had been standing 3 feet from the gap in that door the entire time, listening to every word. He did not announce himself right away. He simply watched her through the narrow opening the way he watched everything, still, unreadable, cataloging details most people missed. She was not a small woman, built solid and soft in a way the tailored world around her never seemed to accommodate, her uniform a size too tight through the shoulders because the house had never bothered ordering a proper fit for her, and there was ink faintly visible at his own collar and wrists that most of his staff pretended not to notice, the way most of his staff pretended not to notice a great many things about him. He noticed her hands were shaking even after the call had ended. Talia wiped her face with the back of her wrist, took a breath that shuddered only slightly, and turned to go back to her cart of cleaning supplies parked at the end of the hallway. That was when the door opened the rest of the way. "Mr. Yamashita," she said, and the blood left her face so fast she felt it happen. A physical drop, like the floor had tilted under her without warning. She had never once, in 6 months of employment, had a direct one-on-one conversation with the man who owned this house. Staff did not speak to him unless spoken to. Staff especially did not let him overhear their mother's voice cracking through a phone about rent money. "I apologize, sir," she said quickly, straightening, wiping the last trace of wet from her cheek with a motion so practiced it looked almost invisible. "I'll finish the hallway and be out of your way." He did not move aside to let her pass.
"Sit down," he said.
"I'm sorry? There is a chair in the sitting room behind me," he said.
"Sit down."
It was not a request, though his voice never rose above a low, even register, the kind of voice that had clearly never needed volume to be obeyed. Talia's mind raced through every possible reason a mafia boss might want to speak privately with a maid he had just overheard crying in his hallway, and none of the reasons her imagination offered her were good ones. She followed him inside anyway, because refusing him was not a real option available to someone in her position, and sat on the very edge of a chair upholstered in fabric that probably cost more than her monthly rent by itself. "How much do you owe?" he asked, standing near the window with his hands folded behind his back, his profile lit by the low evening light coming through glass that stretched floor to ceiling. "That's not something I can discuss, sir," she said carefully. "It's not appropriate." "I am not asking as your employer," he said. "I am asking because I heard the fear in your voice through a door I should not have been standing near in the first place, and I find I cannot simply pretend I did not hear it." She stared at him. Nothing about this conversation matched anything she had been told to expect from the man everyone in this house spoke about only in careful, lowered tones, the man whose name alone made grown security guards stand straighter. 1400, she admitted finally, because something in the stillness of the room made honesty feel like the only available option. That's what we're behind. My mother's rent went up again, and her hours got cut at the same time, and I've been sending everything I can, but everything I can isn't $1,400, not on what this house pays a maid. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her the way he studied everything, calculating, precise, and then he said something that would replay in her mind for days afterward. That is not a debt, he said. That is a rounding error in this house's monthly accounts. And yet it is enough to make a grown woman cry in a hallway rather than ask anyone for help. That tells me something about how this house has treated you that I intend to correct. I don't need charity, she said, sharper than she meant to, pride overriding fear for just a moment. I need a paycheck, sir. And I have one, and I'll figure the rest out the way I always do. Something shifted behind his eyes, not offense, something closer to recognition.
Good, he said.
I have no interest in charity either. I have interest in competence, and in 6 months, you have kept this wing of my house cleaner and quieter than staff I have employed for years. That has value. I intend to compensate it properly starting immediately, effective this month, and what you do with the increase is entirely your own business. That was the moment everything changed, though Talia would not fully understand how much until later, when the danger that came with proximity to a man like Ryusei Yamashita finally arrived at her own door instead of staying safely on the other side of his. The raise came through within the week, more than doubling what she had been earning, and Talia told herself it changed nothing beyond the numbers on her paycheck, that a man correcting an unfair wage was simply a man correcting an unfair wage, nothing more. She sent the extra straight to her mother that same day, transferring it before she could talk herself into second-guessing whether accepting it made her complicit in something she did not fully understand yet. She mentioned none of it to the other staff, though word traveled anyway the way it always did in a house full of people who noticed everything and said little. A housekeeper named Beatrice cornered her near the laundry room a few days later, arms crossed, expression somewhere between curious and wary. You talked to him, Beatrice said. Face to face. Nobody talks to him face to face. He overheard something he shouldn't have, Talia said carefully. It wasn't anything I asked for. Careful, Beatrice said, not unkindly. Men like him don't do anything without a reason, even the decent-looking ones. Especially the decent-looking ones. I know how to take care of myself, Talia said, and meant it, though some small part of her filed the warning away anyway, because Beatrice had worked this house for 9 years and had outlasted 3 different heads of security, and a woman like that did not offer warnings for free. She kept working the East Wing with the same quiet efficiency she always had, and if she noticed Ryusei Yamashita's study door was open more often when she cleaned that hallway now, she told herself that was coincidence too. It stopped being coincidence on the night the first threat arrived. She heard the shattering glass before she understood what it was, a sound too sharp and too close to be anything from the kitchen, and by the time she reached the hallway outside the study 2 of Ryusei's security men were already moving past her at a dead run, weapons drawn, shouting instructions to each other in clipped, urgent tones. Talia flattened herself against the wall out of pure instinct, the same wall she had cried against 2 weeks earlier, and it was there, frozen with her heart slamming against her ribs, that she saw Ryusei himself step out of the study with something dark red spreading along the sleeve of his shirt and an expression that had not changed at all despite the blood. He moved past her toward the front of the house without slowing, without so much as glancing at his own arm, issuing orders in that same low, even voice, and Talia found herself moving too, not toward safety like every instinct screamed she should, but toward the security station down the hall, because she had noticed something none of the running men seemed to have noticed yet, a service door near the kitchen that had been left ajar, the kind of small detail a maid, who cleaned that hallway every single day, would catch instantly, and a security detail sweeping the main rooms might miss entirely. She grabbed the nearest guard by the sleeve. The kitchen door, she said. The service entrance by the pantry. It's open. It's never open. The guard's eyes went wide, and within seconds half the response team had redirected toward the kitchen instead of the front hall, and it was there, in the narrow service corridor behind the pantry, that they caught the second man, the one who had been meant to slip in through the back while chaos covered the front. Talia had not fired a weapon or thrown a punch, but she had noticed the one detail that mattered. And later, once the house had gone quiet again, and the intruders had been dealt with in whatever manner this world dealt with such things, Ryusei found her still standing near the kitchen with her hands shaking again, this time from adrenaline instead of grief. "You noticed the door," he said. Bandaged sleeve now, dark suit jacket discarded somewhere, shirt still stained but the wound itself clearly no longer his immediate concern. "My own security team did not notice the door. You did. I clean that hallway every day," she said. "I know when something's wrong with it."
"That is not a small thing," he said.
"That is the difference between a house that survives tonight and one that does not." He studied her for a long moment, something behind his eyes she could not fully name yet, something that had nothing to do with debt or wages or employment at all. "I owe you something beyond a paycheck now, Talia Brooks."
"You don't owe me anything," she said.
"I just didn't want anyone getting hurt." He almost smiled, the barest movement at the corner of his mouth, gone as quickly as it appeared.
"Careful," he said.
"That is precisely the kind of thing that gets noticed in this house." The days that followed carried a different weight than the 6 months before them had. Security around the estate doubled, and Talia found her own movements quietly restricted in ways that were never explained outright but were understood anyway. Certain hallways closed at certain hours, a guard now stationed near the east wing where none had stood before. She asked one of the household staff, a groundskeeper named Wallace who had worked the estate for over a decade, what exactly had happened that night, and Wallace only shook his head and told her some things in this house were better left alone, that the man who had tried to get through the service door worked for a rival named Ishikawa who had been circling Ryusei's territory for the better part of a year, looking for any weakness to exploit. "I'm not a weakness," Talia said aloud to no one in particular later that night, scrubbing a countertop that did not need scrubbing simply because her hands needed something to do. She was wrong, though neither she nor Ryusei fully understood how wrong until the following week, when Ishikawa's people made their intentions unmistakably clear. Talia found a note tucked beneath the windshield wiper of the second-hand car she used to drive into town on her days off. No signature, only a single line of type that made her blood run cold. "We know who cleans his hallways. We know where her mother lives." She did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the staff quarters with a note in her lap, replaying every version of what to do next: call her mother and warn her, call the police and explain a threat she could not fully explain without revealing things about her employer she was not supposed to know, or do the one thing every instinct told her was the actual right answer and go straight to Ryusei Yamashita himself. She thought about Beatrice's warning in the laundry room, about men who did nothing without a reason, and wondered for the first time since that first conversation in the study whether kindness from a man like Ryusei could ever exist separate from calculation, whether the raise and the open study door, and the way he said her name now had all simply been another kind of leverage she had been too grateful to notice. She sat with that fear for nearly an hour, turning it over the way she turned over every room she had ever cleaned, looking for the lie underneath the surface. She did not find one. What she found instead was a man who, as far as she could tell, had never once asked her for anything in return for what he had given her, and that, more than any declaration he could have made, was the thing that finally got her off the edge of that bed and moving down the hallway toward his study at midnight. She found him in his study close to midnight, the same room she had first been summoned into weeks earlier, and this time she did not wait to be told to sit. She simply set the note down on his desk and stood there with her arms crossed, refusing to let her voice shake even though everything in her wanted it to. "They know about my mother," she said. "They left this on my car. If anything happens to her, because of something happening in this house, I need you to understand that I will burn this entire place down myself before I let that stand." He read the note twice, his expression settling into something colder and more controlled than she had seen from him even on the night of the attack, and when he looked up at her there was something raw underneath the calculation, something that looked, for just a moment, like guilt. "This is exactly what I feared would happen," he said quietly. "I told myself raising your wage, protecting your position in this house, was a simple correction of an injustice. I did not let myself consider that visibility in my world is its own kind of danger. I have made you a target without ever asking if you wanted that risk.
I didn't ask for any of this, she said.
Not the raise, not the target on my back, none of it. But I'm not asking you to fix it by pretending I don't exist either. I need my mother safe. That's the only thing I actually need from you right now. She will be safe within the hour, he said, already reaching for his phone. This is the one thing in my life I refuse to fail at twice. The word twice landed heavier than she expected, and something in his face told her there was history behind it, a wound he had not shown anyone in this house before. Twice, she repeated quietly. He set the phone down without dialing yet, and for a long moment the study held nothing but silence, the kind that said more than either of them was ready to put into words. There was a woman once, he said finally. Someone I loved before this house, before the weight of everything I inherited settled fully onto my shoulders. She was not born into this world any more than you were. I told myself I could protect her the way I told myself I could protect everyone who mattered to me. I was wrong. The people who wanted to hurt me found her instead, and by the time I understood what visibility near me actually cost, it was already too late to change the outcome. I have spent years since then making certain no one else gets close enough to pay that price again. I'm already close enough, Talia said softly. That decision got made the night I told your security about that door. You don't get to protect me by keeping distance now. That ship already sailed. Something in him seemed to give way slightly at that, some wall lowering by degrees rather than collapsing outright, and he picked the phone back up and made the call that would move her mother, quietly and quickly, into protection. Talia had not known this house was even capable of arranging a secure apartment across town with security discreet enough that her mother would never fully understand the scale of what was being done for her. In the days after her mother's safety was secured, something shifted permanently between Talia and Ryusei, a proximity that no longer had any pretense of employer and employee behind it. He began finding reasons to be in the East Wing at hours he had never frequented before, and she began finding herself less afraid of the silences between them and more curious about what lived inside them. One evening, she found him at the far end of the east hallway, simply standing near the window she usually cleaned, no papers in his hand, no reason to be there at all beyond the fact that he had been there. You don't have to make excuses to walk this hallway, she said, setting her cart down. It's still my job to clean it whether you're standing in it or not. I am not making an excuse, he said. I am aware I do not need one. I find I still prefer having a reason anyway. It feels less like something I am taking without asking. That's a strange way to think about walking down your own hallway, she said.
Perhaps, he said.
Everything in this house belongs to me on paper. I have learned the hard way that ownership and belonging are not the same thing, and that the second one has to be earned honestly, or it means nothing at all. She did not have an answer for that right away, so she kept dusting the window ledge, and he stayed exactly where he was, not offering to help, not leaving either, simply present in a way that felt entirely new for both of them. Later that week he began asking her small things about her life before this house, the town she had grown up in, the community center where her mother used to volunteer, the reason she had chosen housekeeping work over the retail job a friend had once offered her. I like knowing a place inside and out, she told him one evening, folding linens in a small sitting room off the East Wing while he sat across from her with a book he was not actually reading. Every room tells you something if you pay attention long enough. People don't always tell you the truth, but rooms do. A room can't lie to you the way a person can. That is, he said slowly, possibly the most useful description of intelligence I have ever heard from anyone in this house, staff or otherwise.
I wasn't trying to be smart, she said.
I was just telling you why I like the work. That is precisely what made it useful, he said, and something in the quiet after that landed differently than any of their conversations had landed before, less like two people navigating a hierarchy, and more like two people simply choosing to be honest with each other, because the alternative had stopped feeling worth the effort. It was during one of those quiet evenings, both of them standing near the same floor-to-ceiling windows where he had first told her about her raise, that the tension finally broke fully into words. You say my name differently than you used to, she said, watching the grounds outside darken toward true night. I did not realize I did that, he said, though something in his tone told her he had, in fact, realized it for some time now.
You do, she said.
It used to sound like an instruction. Now, it sounds like something else. He turned to face her fully then, and the careful distance he had maintained since the night of her mother's move seemed to collapse all at once. "You're the first person in this house in years who made me feel like more than the weight I carry," he said, voice lower than she had ever heard it. "I built every wall in this life to keep exactly this kind of closeness from happening again, and you walked straight through all of them with nothing more than honesty and a good eye for an open door." "That's not exactly romantic," she said, though her breath had gone unsteady. "It is the truest thing I have said to anyone in 6 years," he said. "I am not skilled at romantic. I am skilled at survival. What I am telling you is that surviving without you nearby has started to feel like the wrong kind of survival entirely." Ishikawa's final move came 3 nights later, faster and more brutal than anything that had come before it, striking not at the mansion directly, but at the security detail guarding Talia's mother across town, a coordinated attempt to draw Ryusui's people thin in 2 places at once while a second team moved on the estate itself. Talia had spent that entire day on edge, half expecting something without knowing what, cleaning the same window ledge in the east hallway 3 times because her hands needed the motion even when her mind could not settle. Talia was in the kitchen when the alarms began sounding, and instead of retreating to her quarters the way protocol demanded, she moved toward the security station because she had spent 6 months learning every hallway, every door, every hidden angle of this house better than most of the men paid to guard it. She found Wallace pinned down near the greenhouse entrance, cut off from the rest of the response team by 2 of Ishikawa's men who had breached the eastern perimeter, and without stopping to weigh the danger properly, she grabbed the heavy iron garden shears from the potting bench beside her and swung them hard into the back of the nearest attacker's knee, dropping him instantly, buying Wallace exactly enough time to get his own weapon up and finish what she had started. The second man turned toward her, and it was Ryusui who reached the greenhouse a half-second later, moving through the narrow space with the same terrible precision she had seen the first night, ending the threat before it could fully turn toward her at all. "You're supposed to be in your quarters," he said afterward, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles again, eyes scanning her for injury with an urgency he no longer bothered disguising. "I was supposed to keep this house safe too," she said. "Turns out I'm good at more than just cleaning hallways." Ishikawa himself did not survive the night, cut down in the confrontation at the estate's main gate by his own miscalculation as much as by Ryusui's response, and by the time the grounds had gone quiet again the threat that had shadowed Talia and Ryusui for weeks had finally ended the way things ended in this world, decisively and at a cost that would not be spoken of openly again. 2 of Ryusui's men did not walk away from that night, among them a young guard named Price who had stood watch outside the East Wing more nights than Talia could count, and Ryusui's grief for him, carried the same way he carried everything, quiet and controlled, was something Talia stood beside without needing to be asked. In the hours immediately after, before grief had fully settled into the house, there were practical matters that could not wait, guards to debrief, the local authorities to manage with a particular mixture of influence and discretion this world required, Talia's mother to reassure over a phone call that could not fully explain what had happened without frightening her further. Talia found herself standing in the middle of it all, not sent away to her quarters the way she once would have been, but included, quietly, in a way that told her more about how far things had shifted than any conversation could have. "You could have stayed out of the greenhouse," Ryusui told her later, once the house had finally gone still, his voice rough in a way she had not heard from him before. "You could have stayed exactly where protocol told you to stay, and no one would have blamed you for it."
"I know," she said.
"I made a different choice anyway." "You keep doing that," he said. "Making the choice no one asks you to make."
"Somebody has to," she said.
"Might as well be somebody who knows this house better than the people paid to protect it." He did not have an answer for that right away, and for a long moment they simply stood together in the wreckage of the night, not touching, not needing to, the silence between them carrying more weight than it ever had before. In the weeks that followed, life at the estate slowly found a new shape, one where the line between staff and something else entirely had stopped pretending to exist at all. Talia's mother, once the danger passed, was offered a modest position managing the household accounts for a small business Ryusui quietly funded, work that let her keep her independence while never again facing a rent increase she could not absorb. Talia herself was offered, formally this time, a choice rather than an assumption, to remain in the East Wing in whatever capacity she wanted, cleaning hallways if that was still what she wanted to do, or something else entirely if it was not. Wallace found her in the greenhouse one afternoon, repotting a plant that did not strictly need repotting, and set down his tools long enough to say something she would carry with her for a long time afterward.
10 years I've worked these grounds, he said.
Never once seen him stand this close to anybody who works for him. Not once. Whatever you did to earn that, don't let anybody talk you out of trusting it, including yourself.
I didn't do anything, she said.
I just refuse to disappear. That's the thing most people in this house never manage, Wallace said.
Don't undersell it.
Beatrice, too, softened toward her in the weeks after Ishikawa's fall, catching her one evening near the laundry room again, this time with something closer to respect in her expression than warning.
Guess I owe you an apology, Beatrice said.
Didn't figure you for someone who'd take out 2 of Ishikawa's men with garden shears and a decent aim. Wasn't planning on it going that way, Talia said. Nobody ever plans it that way, Beatrice said. That's usually when it counts the most. She found Ryusei on the terrace on a cool evening 2 weeks after Ishikawa's final move. The grounds spread out dark and quiet below them, and she came to stand beside him rather than waiting to be summoned the way she once would have.
You're not going to tell me what to choose, she said.
I learned that lesson already, he said. Twice, apparently, is enough for anyone. Whatever you decide, I will not make the mistake of deciding it for you. She looked out over the grounds, quiet now in a way they had not been in weeks. The greenhouse where Wallace had nearly been overwhelmed now repaired and lit softly against the dark. The same windows where a security team had once run past her at a dead run now catching nothing more dramatic than moonlight. It was strange, she thought, how quickly a place could hold 2 entirely different histories at once. Danger and safety layered over the same stone and glass. She thought about the note left on her windshield, about the garden shears and the sound they made connecting with bone, about a man who had stood 3 feet from a cracked door and chosen to hear her pain instead of walking past it the way most powerful men in this world would have. I'm not staying because you fixed my mother's rent, she said finally. I'm staying because for the first time in my life someone saw exactly how much I was carrying and didn't ask me to carry it smaller or quieter. You didn't want me invisible. You wanted me exactly as loud as I already was, even when loud meant crying in a hallway you weren't supposed to be standing near. I was standing near a great many hallways I was not supposed to be standing near that month, he said, something almost like warmth threading through the words. I have never regretted an eavesdropped conversation more, or less, in equal measure.
And the danger, she asked.
It doesn't end just because Ishikawa's gone. There will always be another Ishikawa in a life like yours. There will, he said. I am done pretending distance keeps the people I care about safe. It never did. It only kept them alone right up until the moment it failed anyway. I would rather build something honest beside you and fight for it every single day than build something safe and empty and call that protection. That's the only kind of promise I would have believed anyway, she said, and reached for his hand, the same hand that had steadied a phone against his own ear countless nights that week arranging her mother's safety without ever once making a show of it, and neither of them said anything else for a long moment, because there was nothing left that needed saying out loud, only the truth of a choice finally made, standing together on a terrace above grounds that had tried and failed to take either of them from the other. She would think about that later. The way the whole story had turned on a cracked door and a mother's worried voice on the other end of a phone call never meant to be overheard. The way the smallest unguarded truth had reshaped the entire course of both their lives, and she found, standing there with his hand in hers, that she did not mind the thought at all. If this story pulled you in the way it pulled us in writing it, hit that like button before you go, and drop a comment telling us which moment hit hardest, the hallway, the garden shears, or the terrace, because we read every single one of them. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next dark romance story landing on this channel. And if you want more slow burn danger and mafia boss tension, we've got a whole playlist waiting for you right after this. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.